Hello, hello. Welcome to the stream. It's been a little bit. I had a vacation and kind of took the week after that off, more or less, so I'm back to it now. I'll pull up the system here so you can see what we're working with. So today we're going to be doing some render testing in Blender benchmark scenes that are pretty standard. A lot of people recognize them from gaming benchmarks. But the GPU we're testing tonight is the brand new RX 7800 XT from AMD. I don't have any other 7000 series GPUs yet, so I'm really excited to see how they do in this type of work. And this system is one of my Dell T3600s. I have 64 gigs of quad channel RAM installed, and the biggest processor this thing can run, which is an 8-core 16-thread Xeon. So that's the system. I might wait just a second to see if anyone else hops in. Sunken in Time says hi. Hello, welcome to the stream. Glad you're here. Yeah, so 7800 XT. So if you're new to the channel, I have a whole bunch of other GPU results. So we'll be bouncing back and forth. We'll run each test, we'll record the results, and this should go pretty quick, probably less than an hour total. But yeah, so if you've watched gaming benchmarks for this card, it looks like in a lot of games, on average, it competes or beats even the NVIDIA 4070, which is a bit more expensive than this. So I'll be really curious to see how these go. But this first scene here I have open already is the classroom scene. It's the first frame we're going to render, and I have my device set to GPU compute. I don't change any other settings. I'll pull up the preferences here. We are running HIP RT, which Blender 3.6 still says is experimental. I have looked into this more. It looks like the real HIP RT actually won't be fully enabled in Blender until Blender 4. So once Blender 4 fully launches, not alphas or betas, I'll rerun a bunch of these tests because AMD GPUs might get a huge speed up from the full implementation. So that is one thing to note. It's not necessarily fully in there yet. Sunken in Time says, I've been waiting to see someone test the 7800 XT in Blender. I'm debating on getting the 3080 or 7800 XT for my new PC. Coming from an RX 580. Yeah, RX 580 is not supported in Blender 3 Plus. You can almost get it to work with some tricks, but it's not worth it. So any of these cards, these newer ones, are going to be a huge jump for you. But I guess, yeah, we'll see how the 7800 XT compares, because I do have plenty of 3080 results to show. So yeah, this should be good. But we'll go ahead and get into this first test. This is the 7800 XT on Blender's HIP cycles, and we have the RT mode enabled. So I'm just going to go ahead and click render. And like I always do, normally I'll let the scene start one time so all the shaders can build, and then I'll cancel it and rerun the test. This one is so light, it doesn't really need that. It only takes a few seconds to get everything going anyway. So we'll play that by ear. But this thing's already past halfway done. And I'm just watching the sample count at the top. And that's it. So just under 35 seconds. So 34.8 seconds. So I'll just minimize that. I'll pull up my spreadsheet, and we'll go over here to the classroom tab. And we'll probably run these. We'll log each result first, and then we'll come back at the end and compare results of other cards. Very first look, it looks like we're a little bit faster than the A770 and right about where a 6800 XT is. So we'll see when we get a heavier scene what the results look like. But the next one is Barbershop, so let's go ahead and pull that up now. And the classroom scene is less and less useful because it's such a lightweight scene. So the results are not as good as they used to be. But we'll pull up the Barbershop. This one takes just a few seconds to load because it's so heavy. All right. So when I test these, I run frame 100. This one changes so little frame to frame, it probably won't matter. Then all I change is the device to GPU compute. Don't touch anything else. Go up to edit. Make sure that our 7800 XT is still the one enabled on the HIP RT. And we'll go ahead and start. So now here is where I'll watch. If this takes a long time to load up at the beginning, we'll let it start rendering and then come back and restart it so that the loading time is not part of the test result. And this scene sometimes does take a little longer than others, but it looks like we're definitely having to build that that ray tracing structure is what it is. So we've started sampling. I'm going to stop it and then restart. And the reason I do that is just to compare the actual render speed instead of the loading speed for the first time, because the first time you render a scene, it has to load all that, and then from there on it doesn't. So rendering animations, that extra time is not a useful measure, and that would throw our results off a lot. So now here it's loading all the same stuff, but we know that we've given it the chance to get everything ready ahead of time. It looks like for this one, it's got to do the whole process again though, which is fine. And that took about 24 seconds to get going. And while this one runs, because it is a little bit longer, I'll pull up Task Manager on the side just so we can watch the temperature. This GPU is brand new. I haven't tested it prior to this stream, so I just want to keep tabs on it. If we have any crashes, I'll have to watch, to make sure it wasn't maybe a temperature issue, because I can go in and ramp up the fans a little more. But this PC that it's running in has no side panel on, and there's a lot of airflow in the room, so it shouldn't get too hot, and it should be a bit cooler than in a closed case. But we're well into the test now, and it looks like it's only running at about 59 Celsius, so that's decent. Let me pull up the compute graph on top. Oh, I guess it already had that one there, but when rendering in Blender, the 3D will only work if you're running on older rendering processes, so like CUDA. But if you run on HIP RT or NVIDIA's optics, the compute graph is what you'll want to see for your utilization. Otherwise, Windows won't report the right thing. Because you can see here, it looks like it's only running like up to 10%, and that's not true. But yeah, it looks like it's running nice and cool, staying under 60 Celsius on the core, so we don't have any thermal problems yet. And this one is about done, so we'll wait for the result. So I think for Blender, I have predictions about how this is going to perform relatively, but the big draw here is it has 16 gigs of VRAM, and it's a very high power card with 16 gigs of VRAM for fairly cheap, so it's going to attract a lot of attention. But okay, so we have our result here. It looks like this took 2 minutes, and we'll round up to 21 seconds. So all of these results are listed in seconds. So 221 is 141. All right, so that test, it looks like we're somewhere near the 6800 XT again. which interestingly, these two GPUs, the 7800 XT and the 6800 XT, are priced very near to each other if they're both brand new. So, um, value wise, it comes down to the power draw in that case. But we'll do all of our comparisons at the end. So the next one we're going to do is the Lone Monk scene. So I'll just close this, open up our next set here. All right. So we are set up to GPU compute already. I'll make sure that the render settings aren't set to optics or something. Nope, they're open image denoise, so we should be good there. Preferences, HIPRT, 7800 XT, we should be good to go. So I'll hit render. And this one, I believe the loading doesn't take very much. Yep, so we should be good with this test to just let it keep going. Get our task manager graph back up here. Now I could be running like hardware monitor instead of this to get more information, but I really just want to make sure it doesn't overheat on the core. I'm not too worried about the VRAM at this point. So if I start to see really weird temperatures, then I'll go look into it more. But from what I can see just here, I don't think we have thermal issues. So what I expect to see from this is that AMD's newest generation, it I hope the ray tracing performance is boosted a lot, because in Blender, in rendering, especially with cycles, that's really what you want to see is better RT performance. Um, these first tests, it looks like it's a really close race with the 6800. So the same price point of GPU, a new generation, but having the same performance would be strange. So we'll have to look at power draw to see if that adds some of that value back. But it could just be that the ray tracing performance isn't a lot better in this generation. Uh, but I know for a fact that the gaming performance and the rasterizing performance is significantly better. I don't know exactly what percentage yet. But so if you're gaming with it, it's still going to beat the old cards and at less power draw. But um, we'll have to see just exactly what the effect is. And obviously, on any hardware, Blender doesn't really use all of the fancy rendering tricks that games do. And, NVIDIA and AMD both have their own, like, AI tricks and stuff like that to make games run faster. So none of that is applicable to this. So really, we're testing the RT performance at its most base level without all the fanciness. I really wish that they would add frame generation to rendering animations, because imagine rendering like half of the frames and then having it create fake ones in between. That would save so much time. It'd be awesome. But I don't know if that will ever happen or not. But looks like this test is past halfway already. This one is heavy duty, so we're getting just into the 60 degrees. 61 Celsius is what it shows right now. 62, so it's getting a little warmer. But at its highest, my 4090 gets into the 60s as also. I don't think this is really any cause for concern. Sunken in Time says that would be really good. Yeah, can you imagine if they could put all the gaming tech into rendering animations, like maybe with a separate menu or something like that, but just full integration to have the ability to add frames in between would just be fantastic. I mean, you could run 30 frame per second animations and then just upscale it to 60 frames with no hardware hit, basically. So that plus all the fancy denoising tricks and all that, like DLSS 3.5 just came out, and that creates the original rays that the lights emit, and it rebuilds them so that they're true in the final render after denoising. It's incredible. So hopefully we get that kind of stuff here in the future. But All right, so this scene got done 4 minutes and 5 seconds. So let's go log that. I did see our GPU got up to about 64C, which isn't concerning yet. Lone Monk scene. And I said it was what, 4 minutes and about 5 seconds. So 245. And just looking over my results here, that's right about the same as the 6800 XT. I promise you guys, I promise it's not a 6800. I'm not pulling your leg here. It's basically tying that card in all of these tests so far. So the one thing I will do after this, if people are interested, is go back and rerun these without the RT enabled and see what the effect is. But yeah, so 245 is just 1 frame or 1 second faster than the 6800. So let's minimize that and let's do our Scanlands scene. And I have a couple other ones in here, but I don't normally run them. They just either had problems or they're EV tests, which I'm not going to run on this stream. I think one place where the 7800 XT would really shine though is testing EV animations, because that's going to use more of the rasterizing speed, and that's really where this new generation gets its advantages. But let's go here and make sure everything's enabled. Looks like we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit render. Now I have had results on this scene in the past that put these 7000 series GPUs well ahead of the older ones. So we shall see what this one does, but this one's only 300 samples, but it's a very heavy scene to run. And I would say this is probably my favorite benchmark scene. This one just looks so cool. But it's got a lot of objects, so I'm always surprised how efficiently this frame can be rendered. All right, we're almost a third done already. Let's pull up our temperature here. Yep, so haven't even got back to 60 yet. But yeah, so this model is the Sapphire Pulse, which is the 2-fan 7800 XT from Sapphire. I prefer smaller cards because then I know they fit in all of my ATX cases and all of my Dells can fit them. You start to get these massive 3-fan cards, and while yes, they probably are cooler, quieter, and may run a little faster, it's really hard to get them to fit. I do have a test bench frame that I bought that I've been working on tonight. I'm going to switch all my tests over to a newer motherboard so that uh, people don't have to wonder if the old machines cause any problems with it. I don't think they do, but that one is open air, and the GPU can basically be infinitely large, which don't tell the companies that I said that, because they'll probably just keep making them bigger. And that's really not what we need, but um, yeah, I'll be able to test everything on that, so it won't matter. But all right, this one's almost done. Looks like we're just denoising. So we'll close the task manager there. All right, 2 minutes and 7 seconds. So let's go to the Scanlands result here. 2 minutes and 7 seconds is 127, and that is 2 seconds slower than the 6800 XT and 1 second faster than an Arc A770. So in all these tests, one thing I've seen is the Arc A770 really surprises me. And if Intel has driver updates in the future that further improve it, that thing is going to just be an absolute beast, especially if you can get it on sale, because I've seen them for under 300 bucks, even for the 16 gig model. But so let's go back. Let's go back and sort these results, and then I'll probably circle around and run all these scenes again without the RT, because that'll show us a little bit more about the GPU speed itself. So let's go ahead and sort this column here. So they're sorted by smallest time to largest time, and I'll highlight the 7800 XT result here. So this is the classroom results. I have prices listed for some of these. You can kind of see the older cards I don't have pricing on because they're hard to buy new, and sometimes new prices on older hardware don't make sense anymore. I know you can still buy 6800s for $530 new, so I've left that one in there. And um, the Intel A770 with the 16 gigs is normally 370. I bought mine for under $300 though. I think probably like around Black Friday. But yeah, here's some comparisons that you can see. So Sunken in Time wanted to know about the 3080. So just for the purpose of Blender rendering, it looks like the 3080 is just a little bit slower than twice as fast as the 7800 XT. So about 35 seconds versus about 19 seconds for the 3080. So the 3080 has a power draw of um, closer to 300 watts. I think it's maybe 280, something like that. And OC models have even higher. So maybe we kind of need a column for power draw on here, but the 7800 XT is 236 watt draw. That's what my model has, and that's a more close to the reference model. So it's not the overclock model. Um, but it looks like for just a little bit less power, the 7800 XT is still twice as slow as the 3080. Okay, so if you're looking at the 3080, um, if you get a 3080 12 gig, it's actually more like a 3080 Ti, but you still lose out that 4 gigs of VRAM, and that can be significant. But at this point, I'm gonna have to see a 4060 Ti with 16 gigs because these results are making me think that might be even a better value than this card is. But let's go on to Barbershop and we'll sort our results again. So here is the 7800. It looks like here even the 3070 is a fair bit faster. Again, though, those only have 8 gigs of VRAM. So if you need the VRAM, then that doesn't really make any difference. But it is faster. My 2080 Ti is considerably faster than this card, but it is a Kingpin, so it does have some fancy cooling to it. Um, One that I know people will ask a lot about is the 4070. So from this result, the 4070 got 80 seconds. Again, this is the barbershop scene. 80 seconds for the 4070 versus 141 for the 7800 XT. Sunken in Time says NVIDIA limiting themselves to 12 gigs of VRAM was so stupid. You know, I think to us it is stupid, but they really just want you to buy their um, RTX series Pro cards, which would have been called Quadro in past years, because they really want you to go get the 20 gig small form factor A2000, I think is what they call it, or maybe the oh, they don't use the A now. RTX 4000 at a small form factor, but they have a smaller 2 slot one with 20 gigs. I think they want you to go buy that, but it's like $1,000. So obviously that's pretty silly because the 4070 would beat that by a wide margin in speed. But yeah, you're dealing with 12 gigs of VRAM on the 4070, and if it was 16 or 20, it would be an incredible value for creators. But again, here's the 3080, 81 and a half seconds versus 141. So 4070 is a 200 watt card. Let's just add our watts on the side here for ones we don't have. So the 7800 is 236. So here's how the wattage compares. Just throw a W by those so we know what we're talking about. Um, but yeah, I mean, really, even so, if you look at the 2060 Super is very similar to the 2060 12 gig. So yeah, you lose 4 gigs of VRAM, but those are getting fairly cheap, down into the 300s of dollars, and they're old, but they're still pretty close to this card in rendering speed. So, um, but like from this, if you have a 6800 XT, there's really no reason to get a 7800 unless you're using it for gaming or something else like that. I know like Unreal Engine will run better on these newer cards and stuff like that too. So that's always considerable. Um, I would say one one bright spot in the 7000 series so far is the 7900 XTX. The problem is it varies a lot scene to scene, but you can see for $1,000, it's about twice as slow as the 4090, but I believe the power draw on it is quite a bit less. I don't remember what it is. It might be like 350 watt. So I think it may even be less than that, but the 4090 is 450. So um, but it's the 4090 is still twice as fast as the 7900 XTX. But that's only in pure ray tracing. That's not gaming. So, if I think most people use their cards for more than just Blender, um, I think there's still value here, but a sale on the 7800 XT down into the 400s of dollars would be a much better deal because right now there's just not a whole lot of reason to upgrade from a 6800 XT, and then like a 6950 will beat this. So um, it's a little questionable so far. I'm actually slightly disappointed. I thought this would be doing better than it is. But let's go talk about Lone Monk. So I'll sort that. Basically the same story. This 7800 is still slower than the 3080, somewhat lower power draw, and it does have 16 instead of 10 or 12 gigs of VRAM, which the VRAM requirements of Blender and games and stuff is only going to go up, so it's good to have. But I wouldn't be upgrading from a 6800 XT at this point because it just doesn't provide enough of an advantage. What else? What else is notable on here? Um, yeah, so from NVIDIA, I think the next thing I need to get eventually is the 4060 Ti with 16 gigs because for uh, right at $500, maybe 450, you can get a 4060 Ti with 16 gigs of VRAM, and the power draw is considerably less than this card. So that'd be a good one to test in the future. I just don't have one yet. And then finally, the Scanlands test. Let's sort. So I'll highlight our 7800. And then on this one, again, the 7800 XT was 2 seconds slower than the 6800 XT. And so for all the other reasons that we've already mentioned, don't upgrade for Blender from the 6800 XT at this point. It just isn't adding anything for you unless you also use it for gaming. So um, now one super surprising thing is this Intel GPU. If you can get away with 8 gigs of VRAM, I've seen A770s with 8 gigs of VRAM down in the mid to low 200s of dollars. So if you only need 8 gigs of VRAM, this chip will perform about the same speed with half the RAM, but it's very, very cheap. So, it really depends on what you need. But I mean, look at these comparisons. It's just if I have all the new drivers enabled, the A770 is actually a little faster than the 7800 XT. So if nothing else, I'm just really excited to see what Intel does next because they're onto something here. Although um, they were pretty wild with their power draw this generation because I think this is a 250 watt card. So, but for what it does, it's a good performer. And then you can see like in this test, the we'll compare the 7800 here, and the 3080. So the 3080 is significantly more than twice as fast. So it's more than twice as fast as a 7800 XT. And I know you can get 3080s for well under $500 used. And I don't know if you can find new ones, but that's looking like a better deal at this point. How many samples do you test the scene with? I test the samples with whatever the scene opens on. So we can let's start tabbing through these, and I'll tell you. So for instance, here is Scanlands. And this is just what I open the file. Don't change any of the render scenes or the rendering settings. I just make sure GPU compute is enabled. But max samples on this one is only 300. So on shorter scenes, like 1 or 2 minutes, you're not going to test the cooler as much as like the barbershop scene that takes 4 minutes, where it really has time to get warmer. Um, and I do actually have a longer test scene that I made that's a 100 frame animation, and we can test that one too. Um, this is J squared says, okay, my classroom scene opens with 300. Okay, let's go look at classroom scene. Let's open that one up and see what it is. And actually, I want to go back there anyway because I'm going to retest these with no RT enabled. So this one, I have to change the device to GPU compute every time. Sampling. It looks like, yeah, this one opens with 300 as well. So, and I know Barbershop is 800 samples. And I want to say Lone Monk is actually 4,096 samples. So I guess we didn't have to go through them. I've memorized them. I just didn't remember that. But yeah, so I don't mess with these at all. I try to keep them what they were set on. The one that confuses me is Barbershop Scene because it's got marked keyframes on it, and I'm not sure what exactly the difference is. Because it's an animation, but it doesn't the frames aren't very different from each other. So I've always just picked frame 100 on that test. But yeah, just out of curiosity, let's take off the HIP RT checkbox here and rerun these. And on older cards, the speed up for the RT checkbox was significant. So I'm curious to see if there's a lot of difference on this gen or not. So one other thing uh, to mention is if if you see this stream and you're like, hey, you should run this or that test with it, um, just let me know because I would really like to know what people want to see. I've got all these machines. I may as well test what people want to see. But yeah, so no RT checked on, and I got just over 39 seconds. So let's go plug that in. I'm just going to copy this line of data and throw it down here at the bottom, and then we'll resort it. But this one was 39 seconds, so a little bit more than 4 seconds slower is all. J squared says, interesting, my 3060 12 gig renders the classroom in 32, just under 32 seconds in optics. Yeah. Um, and I know the 3060 12 gig is similar to the 2060 in speed generally. So that makes a lot of sense. So we're kind of up here with it. Let's resort this. I mean, this card is in the ballpark with that, but a 3060 12 gig is significantly less power draw. All of the coolers for those on average are a lot smaller than this one, and those are, well, basically at least $200 cheaper. So, I mean, if, like, still, to be honest, if you guys are looking for Blender GPUs for rendering, then you should still stick with NVIDIA unless you get really good deals on AMD's GPUs because it's just the reality of it right now. A lot of people say, well, there's other creative apps that use AMD's hardware better, and that's probably true. I don't have a way to test Unreal Engine for frame rate yet. I haven't played around with it enough to make a test scene. So that'd be a good example if you guys know where to get a standard test scene that people recognize for Unreal Engine. Then let me know how to get that, because that'd be a good one to test. Because these results don't apply to gaming, they don't apply to like encoding or video playback for video editing, that kind of stuff. So these are very like one-sided tests, but they're really telling for people that know they're going to use Blender. But I'm going to go back to Barbershop again and run that one. But yeah, lately the 3060 12 gig has got some significant price cuts, and um, they've been down around $300, maybe even cheaper, and that's really a good deal. Especially like for me, I would pack 2 of those into this computer, but with this card I can only fit one, and it can only power one. But let's open Barbershop again. J Squared says maybe the Matrix demo they have. Yeah, I'll have to look into those because I have seen those. Um, I just the problem is you have to manually play it as a game, don't you? Or is it like a video? Because the only problem I have with benchmarks where you have to play it is that I can't really standardize how I move around in the scene. So to me, that would introduce a lot of error, because if you turn down a different street every time, you're going to have different things being rendered. So if that's not how it works, then just let me know. But I haven't run those yet, so that would be a good series to do though. J Squared says, yeah, my 5600 XT died, and I got the 3060 for about 220. Yeah, and I'm talking new prices here, so $300 new. But yeah, if you're willing to buy used ones, which I am, a lot of people aren't. Um, but $220 is a great value for the 3060. You load it up and play it like a game in the engine. Okay, okay. So yeah, like to me, to be sure I was doing a really good test, a good thorough test, I would probably just walk straight down the path and try to time it and run like a minute or 2 minutes and get the average frame rate. But it's definitely doable. Mine was new from Best Buy. Awesome. When did you get that? Because I watch GPU prices all the time. I must have missed that one. But yeah, that is pretty fantastic result. I'm going to run this again with no RT. Might be able to publish it as a game and run it outside of the engine to eliminate any wonky variables. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. And then you just know at least um it's not doing any weird workspace stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. And 2 weeks ago you got the 3060. Awesome. Yeah, that's good. And that's the thing. Realistically, any of the modern GPUs are really fast at rendering. So people get too hung up on trying to get the biggest, most expensive, but 12 gigs of VRAM is really useful, and that's a very low power draw card. So even like a 3060, which people might kind of brush off because it's quote unquote lower end, even that can do a ton of work for you. And if you are in a situation where you just need a second machine that runs frames for you all the time, that's a really budget friendly way to start building an extra render machine. All right. Yeah, one other thing I like to watch is how many samples each GPU will run at a time. So it looks like this one's running 8 samples um, every refresh cycle, if you want to call it that. Because what I've noticed, and maybe it only refreshes at a certain time interval, so that doesn't mean much. But I know that like the 4090 runs this scene with like 45 samples per update. So it may just be because it's faster, but it seems like the 4090's memory system or something can handle so much more that it just chews through them in larger batches. but maybe that's talking in circles because I need to learn more about how they work on the back end. But this one's already almost to 600 samples, and this one's basically the longest, so shouldn't be too long now. But I've tried the Radium Pro renderer for Blender, but it doesn't convert cycles materials correctly and looks weird. Yes, I have an old video where I compared Radium Pro to Blender cycles. It is not up to date enough to be faster. The only thing I would get that for is um, if you have certain older hardware, you may be able to use them. That's where I say like the RX 580 might work in Blender with uh, Pro. What do they call it? AMD Pro Render. But if you it's not worth it unless you have really basic materials because yeah, the cycles materials don't convert. There's a button on there for it, and some people know how to use that better than I do. But at some point, it's just like why? It just doesn't have the speed, and you might as well just use Blender's native tools. Zoru says, "Hey, just want to say thank you for all the tests. You are welcome. I am in a unique position to have all this hardware, and I just thought it'd be good to share it with everybody. So that's what I'm here for." J squared says usually give results of less quality than versus Eevee. Yeah, yeah. I think Radiant Pro Render was a great idea, and they just haven't updated it enough to actually use their hardware. So I hopefully that's one of those things. Hopefully in the future they find a way to make it run uh, their cards as well as I know they can. Because like the specs on this GPU, even compared to similar priced NVIDIA ones, the specs on paper look really good. You know, more than 4,000 shader cores, RT cores included, and this one has a wider memory bus, actually twice as wide. So this one's a 256-bit RAM bus, and I think the 4060 Ti is only like 128 gig. So where you have, or sorry, 128 bit, so it's half the bandwidth for the RAM. And I know AMD's GPUs have really high cache on the chip too, so they have really fast access memory, and their memory subsystems are good. But it's just not fully using all the advantages that it could be, and that's partly Blender implementation. That's partly AMD not having the tools ready. But I think their hardware is where it needs to be, and that's why their gaming performance is so good because it uses all of the hardware the right way. Maybe Rock M will fix this if it comes to Windows, but who knows? Yeah, I people have commented that, and they said that the hardware is not the problem. It's not AMD's fault, stuff like that. I'm not trying to assign any fault. It's just if they've got tools like that that would make this work better, then I you know, just let us have them. But I understand the Blender market for GPUs is a pretty small niche, but I feel like it converts over to a lot of softwares really well. So anyway, okay, so this one got done. This was 3 minutes and 2 seconds. So let's go throw that in there. Nope, don't still have my information selected. So I'll copy this down. So 3 minutes is 180 plus 2 seconds. And we'll resort. Okay, so this one is actually okay. So now this is no RT. I should make sure I label that properly. So this is just the same test with HIP and no RT checkbox. But in this test, it looks like with no RT enabled, the $530 7800 XT is actually 9 seconds slower than the ARC A770. So when I test the Arc A770 that has all of the optimal drivers and um, uh, direct memory access enabled, so that there's none of those extra um, conditions left out. I have tested the A770 with no, oh, that's what it is, resizable bar. With and without it makes a pretty big difference in speed. And once all that's turned on, the A770 is actually a really good deal just on the price. But you can see here that so in this exact test, 41 seconds is the difference with having HIP versus HIP RT. And there's no reason not to run the RT version because it does work all the time now. So it's not like it's buggy sometimes. I just like to see what the effect of turning it on and off is because then it shows people uh, the difference that just drivers and just software can make for render speed. And really part of what I'm trying to do with all these tests too is to over time just kind of understand how different parts of the hardware work, and testing these versus games versus other things is a great way to kind of separate the hardware. All right, so I'm gonna run the Lone Monk scene next. Zoru says the 3060 will beat the A770. Sadly, yeah, the 3060, anything above 3060 from Nvidia is probably going to be a better idea than the same price for any other brand right now. And there's little exceptions where, well, for only 50 more dollars, I can get four more gigs of VRAM, whatever. But just on a raw speed for ray trace rendering, it looks like Nvidia cannot be beat yet. But let's run this test. This one will take probably closer to 5 minutes. And this one will be good to watch our temperature. So I'll leave that up on the screen. And this is going to take a minute, so I'm gonna close my remote desktop here for a second. I did add a tab here for the CPU tests. I had a video about it the other day. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. I'm going to add the results. I did get some comments with results in here, but basically these are just CPU tests for baking, and I have some little baking scenes for fluid simulations that I created and shared. So if you wanna test those on your machine, then go check that out. But I'm gonna start logging all those in here. Again, I think Blender is a great way to separate parts of hardware. So I really am interested to see what the difference in RAM speed does versus the same processor because I don't have the ability to swap out CPUs a lot. I only have a few models, but everybody will contribute and we can compare, you know, is it worth going from a 3700X to a 5950X if you want to do fluid simulation, that kind of thing. So we're starting some CPU testing here too. And I found that rendering on CPUs is not the same type of workload as baking simulations. So I want to get into a little bit different type of data here. But yeah, that's shared. It's on a Patreon link because YouTube doesn't let me share files yet. Once I'm monetized, I can, but I'm not there yet. So it's free on Patreon. You don't have to be a member or anything. But if you go find that video, it's in the link. So let's go back and check on this. All right, it's about a third done. All right. Yeah, and as far as testing other things, people have given me some very specific softwares and RAM tests and storage tests and stuff like that in the comments. So I'll try to get to that kind of thing next. It's just like one of them is transcoding files, and I don't do that normally, so it's going to take me a little bit to figure out how to do that. I don't mind getting free trials of software to test, but I really want to make sure I have everything ready so I can test them within my trial period, because I can't afford to buy, 3ds Max and all the other 3D softwares out there. There's a lot of really cool renders, and um, like Houdini would be nice to have for simulations and stuff like that, but I just can't get them all yet. So maybe someday I'll have all of that stuff and I can really, really test everything. But if you have a way to test certain things, just let me know. This is about 3/4 done, but I mean, you can see the list of hardware that I have. So if you want to know, and I'll go back here to the render farm specs. Um, these are the CPUs I'm working with right now. So I have a good mixture, but I don't have a lot of modern Intel, and I don't have any brand new Intel processors. Um, this machine here is one that I'm actually converting to the test bench because people have wondered if these old Xeons are causing bottlenecks with GPU rendering. I don't think they are, because let's go look at this. Um, this CPU is old, but it still clocks over 3 gigahertz on all core, and it's barely being used here while this is GPU rendering. So I don't think this is causing bottlenecks. I think in really heavy scenes where the CPU has to distribute data faster, it's possible it could be. But all of these machines with these old Xeons have a solid state drive, so they're not running on a slow drive. These things are actually kind of cool. They only have 4 RAM slots, and they only go up to 1600 megahertz speed, but they're quad channel. So it's the last generation that, like, consumer workstations or business computers were quad channel, and now you have to pay up a lot to get pro CPUs, if you will, that offer that sort of bandwidth. But um, they're really interesting machines, and I was able to get 64 gig RAM kits for all of these. So if I ever need CPU rendering, I have a way to do bigger scenes. But all right, so this was 4 minutes and 47 seconds. So I'll go throw that on. Probably have to copy all this again. Throw it down there. And this is with no RT, and then we'll sort one more time. And it looks like in this test, in the Lone Monk scene, it actually didn't make a difference. And that is really weird. Yeah, it's definitely not enabled. So it looks like for this exact scene, that didn't even matter on the 7800 XT. So I did not expect that. And we'll do Scanlands. I know Scanlands is a newer scene, because this one in the notes, the Lone Monk scene is from 2.92. Scanlands is the splash screen for 3.3. So it's definitely a newer version of cycles and all that too. But let's see what this one does. A couple seconds to load. What's really interesting is if you're running um, any NVIDIA GPU before the RTX series, I've noticed that, like, the 1080 actually runs faster on CUDA than on optics. So if you're running 10 series or 1660 supers, um, anything like that or older from NVIDIA, you're probably better off using CUDA. And I think it just doesn't, you don't get any advantage from the optics renderer, but it takes longer to load um, the shaders and the ray tracing um, packages it has to build, the BVH that it builds. That takes longer on optics, and you don't make up the speed. So if you're using 10 series GPUs, then um, maybe just stick with CUDA. And I think a lot of people probably don't realize that that's the case. But let's look here. So yeah, my CPU is pretty comfortably under 15% used, and it's clocking at about 3.4 gigahertz. But I think this one will actually get closer to 3.6, maybe even 4 on single thread. So it's not even that slow of a CPU. But um, I'll do a few spot checks once I get this test bench set up and see if there is any difference with the new CPU. But I don't think Blender uses your computer the same way games do, so that the CPU doesn't have to be at least so fast, or your GPU results don't matter. I don't think it works the same way. But it's good to test these things. So I will say that all of these results, all of these AMD GPU results, minus ones that are shared like this one here, a friend on here, Edgar the Face, has shared his 7900 XTX results. But other than that, these are all GPUs that I either have or had. Um, and these ones, all the AMD ones, were run on those old Xeons. So at very least, these test results all relate to each other very well. The one big standout here is that my workstation has the 4090, and that is on a X570 motherboard. So that's the last DDR4 board for AMD. So that's the 5000 series processors. And since we're talking about it, I'll pull the specs up just so you can see. 16 core 5950X. I have 4 slots of RAM at 3600 megahertz. These have super tight timings, which I guarantee don't do anything for GPU rendering, but I think they're 14 nanoseconds flat for the timings for all the RAM nerds out there. So very, very tight timing RAM, even though it isn't the fastest. But this is what my 4090 runs in. So if any GPU needed system bandwidth and advantages from the CPU, then this 4090 does get that advantage. Basically because it won't fit or even be able to be powered in all these old machines, so I can't go back and test it there. But the test bench will help bring my results into the more modern um, era here. Okay, so this one took 3 minutes and 3 seconds, so I'll throw that on the list. Let's copy this stuff here. Throw it down here. Okay. HIP. All right. And how does that compare to the other result? Again, interestingly, in this scene, it did not make a difference. So, no, wait a minute. It did. 3 minutes and 3 seconds. 183. Okay, so in this one, it made quite a difference. So, sort one more time. But yeah, there's no reason not to use HIPRT. It always works, but it looks like in this test, it's almost a 50% difference. So that's pretty significant. But yeah, as far as GPU tests today, that's going to be it. The only other one that I'll run here is my diamonds test scene. So I'll go start that right now. But it does take a while. The test results I have listed, so I'll go back and show you those. These test results are in minutes. So this is a 100 frame animation of a fluid simulation. It's just a super, super intense reflection based scene, and it takes a long time. So if you're going to have thermal throttling, it's going to happen in this scene. So I'll go start that now, but we're not going to just sit and watch it because it takes a while. Oh, let's see. Let's make sure I get the right one. So this one, it's just this camera here. I won't change any settings. I'll just make sure they're in there the right way. Blender 3.6, HIP. I'll run it with RT because, again, there's no real reason not to. And we'll just start it. 33 minutes for 4090. Yes, but it's 100 frames. So, and it is the full 4096 samples with Let's go look, but I think it's very low noise threshold. Yeah, so it's a 0.02 noise threshold and the full 4096 samples. So there's no shortcuts on this one, which I just wanted to do so that each frame was intense and not just the whole thing. Um, okay. The other thing that I want to test, but I don't know how, is um, the viewport performance of GPUs, but it's a lot harder to test because it's really not super possible to um, record it, if you will. I mean, you can watch your timeline playback, but that's not really a good indicator. So I'm going to come in here and start a new folder for 7800 XT. So basically on this test, what I do is I render all of the frames and I go get the start and end frames for this. Like basically what time they got completed, and that's what I report. But let's go ahead and just start this animation, and you'll see what this scene looks like here in just a second. Now, this kind of thing, I am curious because this one has a lot more light tricks going on. So something like the 7800 XT with newer RT cores may just have an advantage in here where it really doesn't in those other scenes that are just reflections. But yeah, we'll see how fast these frames run, and we'll be able to kind of guess how long this will take. But yeah, so looking at other results, um, the 4090 takes 33 minutes to do 100 frames. So I mean, realistically, that's not even that bad. If you think about that, that's only about 20 seconds per frame, or 3 frames per minute. So even some of these where like the 6800 XT could do this scene in 159 minutes, you know, you probably won't render animations that are only 100 frames because that's about 4 seconds long. But if you left your one 6800 XT overnight to do 400 frames, you would get a pretty cool scene overnight with just the one GPU. So none of these results are bad at all. Like a good standout here again is the 4070 for $600, or they are selling these new for 550 now because they felt the heat from the AMD cards that just came out, which is the 7800 and the 7700. So they did drop that price, but um, I mean, yeah, it's not like a crazy intense scene, but it does take hours. And this is a good one. I like to use this scene to demonstrate why you might need a render farm or an extra 1 or 2 PCs, because if you really do produce frames a lot, it's a pain to have to stop the render to work on the scene and then start it when you're not there. So having all this stuff is great because I can just keep working on my main workstation and let all the other ones go. But let's go back here and we'll pull up our temperature here so we can see if it stays safe. But this thing is on frame 3 out of 100, so it does take a long time, but it looks like these are going in about a minute. And I know, like, toward the middle of it, I think it's like frame 66 is the worst one. Yes, I've compared them to see which one took the longest, but they do get a bit longer, but a minute's really not that bad. So 100 minutes for a 4 second animation that's this intense is not really bad. So yeah, these are taking about a minute. So to put it in perspective, on average through this test, the 4090 does these in about 20 seconds. So in this case, it's 3 times faster, which if you come look, 3 times faster than the 4090, or 3 times slower than the 4090 is 90 minutes. So um, 3 times $530, which let's put our GPU in here too, because we'll add this result, might as well. But if you look at if you look at 530 and $1,600 for the prices, you know that's a factor of 3. So just for a pure dollars per frame rendered, the 7800 XT is on par if this result holds up, if that makes sense. So if you look at it in just pure price per frame, um, there are scenarios where like say you don't have that sort of budget, you would like a 4090, but there's no way you can get one. A 7800 XT may not be a bad option anyway, and it still has good VRAM. So you're going to use more power. So if you start talking about getting multiple small cards that add up to one big card, you're going to use a lot more electricity over time. So keep that in mind. That's the one factor people forget. The 4090 is by far the most efficient GPU in terms of electricity versus amount of work it does. So if you compare it to any other GPU, even really low power draw ones, this thing basically always wins. So you got to eat that initial price, but for the rest of its service life, it's going to pay itself off. Basically, is the point I'm trying to make. Because this one, even at 450 watts, and this 7800 XT, you know what? Let's just let it add a column. Let's just call this TDP, even though that's not necessarily what they'll call it, because I think different companies use different terminology for it. And of course, AMD has these weird ones that don't go to even 5s or 10s. With the 4090, it pays for itself. Yes, yes, it does. The 4090 absolutely over time would pay for itself if you use it in a scenario where you basically make money on it, or I guess really not even make money on it, but you're just going to save power over time. So, a good example of this is if you go look at Best Buy right now, they have RX 580s for like $130, and they're brand new, but you can't really use them for Blender. But I don't know, like say you were mining or something, it looks like, hey, I can get X amount of speed because these are so cheap, but the power just kills you. So um, oftentimes it's better to get one fast one that's as new as you can and eat that power cost up front. But don't go get a 580 for Blender because they're not supported. But I think you know what I mean. Like a good example would be the 5600 XT. Those are really cheap now, and they're okay little gaming cards, but don't get them for Blender because they get left behind. Like you can see down here, um, they're multiple times slower than even lower end cards. Like they're a significant chunk slower than a 6600 even. So, um, yeah, it's just not always worth saving money up front, I guess. Now, if you're just going to do some Blender learning or gaming, then there's no harm in, saving the money up front because if you're not worried about the returns, then it's probably not worth worrying about. But and I live in a place where the electricity is super cheap. I pay 9.1 cents per kilowatt hour, and I know a lot of people that will see this probably pay more like 30 cents. So some people have it 3 to 8 times worse than I do on electricity, but that can be a bigger factor than people realize. Okay, this thing's on frame 9, so we're not gonna get this done. We're not gonna just sit and wait for it. So, um, if you guys have any comments or questions, I'll wait here for just a minute. And then I'll probably end the stream here in a little bit. If you guys want to keep talking in the chat, I'll stay on though. J squared says I put the 5600 XT in my son's PC. He had my old RX 580. Oh yeah. See, and And that's a great upgrade because in general the 5600 XT was it I think it runs quite a bit cooler, and I don't know if it's a lot faster than the 580, but it should have a significantly lower power draw. So uh, that's a good move. And I still have a bunch of old 580s and 5000 series GPUs. They just basically I can take three of those 5700 XTs and put them in a machine, and they're all fairly big and they draw a bit of power, or I can just get one 2060 Super. So it just doesn't make sense to go get those cheaper 5700 XTs anymore. So that's kind of that's the game you play. But yep, this thing's on frame 10. It looks like they're still taking at about just a minute, a little over a minute per frame, and my little glass objects here haven't even hit the water. And when the water starts to deform, that's where the reflections get really intense. But yep, it's great for 1080p gaming. He mainly just plays Rust, Minecraft, or Destiny. Yeah, and it's the same thing. The hardware guys have really got us tricked into thinking we need the biggest and best. But realistically, you can still play any game you want on a 5000 series GPU from AMD. You just have to turn some settings down. And you're not going to have ray tracing, but you know, who cares? If you want to target 60 frames per second, you can run almost all games at lower settings on that. So people definitely get sold. They need bigger and better, and for certain use cases you do, but um, I know a few people from being on YouTube that do a lot of Blender work, and some of these people have laptops with old iGPUs. Um, like I know one guy was using like a fourth gen i5 in a laptop with no discrete GPU in it. So just whatever integrated graphics they had in that laptop, that's all he used for Blender. And he learned on that, and he learned how to to make his scenes efficient so that he wasn't wasting any of the little bit of system he had. Turn down shadows and AO to medium, and that normally gets you 60 FPS. Yeah, yep, exactly. And it is too. It's normally just a couple of the settings that um, they're not even that good looking sometimes. Like turning down shadows and whatnot, like in PUBG, it just kills it to have those turned on, and it doesn't really look that good anyway. So yeah, just put them down and get the speed. Yep, the one gaming thing. So I do play games. Um I don't really do anything with it on YouTube. I actually have a gaming channel that I never post on, but I do want to go test DLSS 3.5 with Cyberpunk because they just added a new aspect to DLSS that um, basically reconstructs the ray information. So it starts rendering, it looks at all the lights, it generates a new frame in between, and then it reconstructs the lighting so that it's more accurate. So I noticed in the previews, like if you look at a TV in the game from far away, you can now see all of the objects on the TV. They don't get blurred out at all because DLSS is actually rebuilding the lighting from how it was supposed to look and then denoising after that. So I do want to try that because apparently it doesn't even cause a slowdown. In some cases, it's a few frames faster, but it looks way better. So that's another one of those things like let me turn on DLSS in Blender. You know, if I could run the viewport with DLSS somehow, that would just be incredible. But I mean, being completely realistic, we still don't have a way to make good hair in Blender, so I don't think they're going to be getting DLSS in there, but you never know what they're cooking up. And I suppose the real answer is I need to learn how to program so I can do it instead of hoping someone else does. But um, J Squared says I did earlier with the 3060 on DLSS Ultra. Wasn't the prettiest, but I stayed around 30 FPS. That's pretty good. What resolution though? 1080p? Yeah. I mean, even that though, DLSS on Ultra, 30 frames is playable at 1080p, but like a 3060 should not be able to run that game very well, but that tech allows it to, and that's just really cool. All right. Well, yeah, so this thing isn't getting up over 60 degrees. Looks like it's running really well. I'm going to let this test keep running. Um, what can we do for fun? Yeah, if you think of a way to test Eevee, because honestly, like maybe just running um a benchmark scene using Eevee would be a good way to test, but I know Blender's got a couple Eevee animations that are benchmark scenes, but I'd really like to see what AMD's GPUs do in Eevee because I do know some people will buy AMD GPUs just for Eevee. They're not interested in cycles rendering because I think it uses just the shader cores more. So it'd be good to test that. All right. One other thing I'm thinking. So I was looking at these. I'm kind of wondering if I forgot to record the result for this properly because I think this was actually like 4 minutes and 46 seconds. So that would actually be 286. So I'm gonna sort these again. I think that's what I actually got on the Lone Monk scene. Yeah, I'm kind of jumping around here, but just looking at that, HIPRT should make a difference. And I noticed on the Scanlands I forgot to switch the number until the last second because I had just copied the cells. But I think that's the result I got. So it wasn't as big of a deal in Lone Monk, but it is 40 seconds of difference. So try to correct that now. But yeah, so J Squared says, yeah, I was surprised it ran. We're talking about running Cyberpunk on DLSS 3.5. But yeah, if a 3060 can run it at playable frame rates, that's pretty incredible. Yeah. So I guess for now that's it for GPU tests. Sometime it might be a while, but sometime I'll try to get a 4060 Ti with the 16 gigs because if that's as good as it could be in ray tracing and at the smaller, cooler size and power draw that those have, I think those might be a really good value winner for Blender use. But I'll have to test it. I know they're not popular in the gaming world, and I think the 7800 would completely decimate it in gaming. But that's not what I test here normally. Hopefully, they put DLSS in for non-path traced. Yeah, I thought that too. I have I played Monster Hunter World, and that was one that had DLSS 2, and I don't think it had ray tracing support, and it doesn't look as good as DLSS 3, obviously, but you get a huge speed boost, and just for rasterizing, I think that makes more sense than trying to ray trace everything. So, or even like Battlefield 5, I think you can run ray tracing, but you only get DLSS if you run ray tracing. So yeah, it'd be really nice if they could just let you always have it. Is Cyberpunk that way too, where you have to have ray tracing on to use DLSS? Because I know on a basic level they don't have to be tied together. And then yeah, so going forward with these CPU tests, if you guys see this and you want to try it out, go get those 2 files downloaded. I have a video, it's about 10 minutes, that just walks through how I ran them and what to report. If you want your name listed here, I will by default. If you don't want it, then tell me in a comment that you don't want it. I have got results from people, I just haven't thrown them in here yet. So that'll come soon. I might make a second little follow-up video to it, but that scene will probably evolve over time because it's only taking about a minute to about 4 minutes for my processor to run the 2 versions. So it's not a very intense test. But I think that one is a good one. It probably doesn't have a lot of error involved, so be a good way to compare baking speed. But I'll update these soon, and we'll talk about those more someday. Uh, and then just so you guys know, I'll do some character stuff in the next week. I'll probably go back to the low poly character series that I was starting. It didn't get a ton of attention at first, so it got knocked down the list of priorities. But I think people like low poly stuff, so I'll probably rekey that into like a video series instead of a live stream. So watch for that. Yeah. Otherwise, we'll see what kind of hardware I can come up with, and um, I'll start testing some of these other things people have asked for. So I think that's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching. Uh, you know, join the channel if you want. I'm getting close to that magical 1,000 number, which is really the beginning of it all. So hoping to hit that here in the next couple weeks. But thanks for coming. Um, J Squared says, okay, I'll catch you later. Have a great weekend. You too. Yeah, thanks for being here. And I'll see you guys later.